Hi everyone, happy second birthday to Book Club, and I'm so thrilled to be joining you for your birthday gathering. I was so thrilled when Kevin reached out and said that you'd been enjoying Becoming AntiFragile and invited me to be part of your second birthday celebration. I can't tell you how much it means to certainly me as an author to know how much the book has resonated with you. Certainly this is my first book, as you will have known from reading the introduction, and sometimes you spend hours at the kitchen bench writing away, wondering really if what you're thinking about things and whether how you're translating the ideas and research is going to make sense to other people. So I want you first to know how meaningful it is and how much joy it gave me when Kevin let me know what you've been enjoying about the book, the questions that you have, the things that are really resonating with you. So thank you so much for sharing that with me. It really has made my day. So Kevin's asked me to do a bit of an introduction to myself, talk a bit about what inspired the book and what my favorite part of the book is. And then he sent me through some specific questions that you've got, which I will certainly do my best to answer within a reasonable time frame. So you will have got some information from me from the introduction that I shared in the book, but you may have picked up that originally I'm from the UK. I grew up in London and spent the first 28 years of my life there. I went to school just outside northwest London in a place called near Harrow, and then went to university at the University of Bournemouth, where my first degree was in business. And that's really why, for me, the home ground for my work and for thinking about how we show up, the systems that we're part of, the culture that we create, and particularly thinking of ourselves through that lens of leadering is in an organizational context, because that was my first degree around business. I then came over to the UK, came over to Australia in 2002, having spent a number of years in senior leadership roles in the UK and Europe. And so as I came into this field of the science of well-being, it was really through that lens of leadership and understanding quite what a difference we as leaders can make. And certainly then, as I experienced being a wife and a partner and a mother, that idea of leadership really expanded beyond the workplace to a very clear understanding of how each of us has an opportunity with every conversation that we have to make a difference for ourselves and for the people that we are leading at that time. And so it's really through that lens that I've written the book. I certainly talk about us being leaders, but as you'll know, I use that term leadering in terms of how we show up every day. So why anti-fragile? Well, for me, as I came out of my kind of very academic career, I guess, I'd been teaching, lecturing and researching at the Centre for Wellbeing Science at the University of Melbourne, and I'm still an honorary fellow there. But as I came away from that, and I felt like I had a whole pantry full of research and theories and frameworks and tools, and I wanted to really put those into the heads, hearts and hands of people so that they could be used every day, really put to good use to make a difference in people's lives. And when I came across the idea of anti-fragile, it was because I read the original book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and I loved the idea, and it was a big enough idea for me to kind of take lots of things from this pantry that I felt was full of so many valuable nutrients and ingredients. And the anti-fragile was a big enough idea for me to be able to use a lot of them and to be able to translate them into very practical ways for people to use every day. Now, as you know, anti-fragile is something that comes from kind of economics and politics. But if you've read any of Taleb's work, he is very academic. He's very, no, perhaps not even academic, because he throws rocks at academia. He's very intellectual. And he's also very transparent and clear that he doesn't expect many of the people who start his books to finish them. Well, for me, that was a bit like a red rag to a bull, because I firmly believe that to be in service of the wonderful work that goes on in academia and the wonderful thinking that goes on there, we're best to take that and translate it into ways that can make a difference in everyday life. And so to read this from Taleb around, no, I don't expect people to finish my books, and, you know, anti-fragile felt like it was only for those, it felt like it was on kind of the top shelf of the pantry. And so it was for only those people who were kind of tall enough to reach it. Well, I was certainly tall enough to reach it, but I was also determined to bring it down onto every single shelf below that. And really, that's why I wrote Anti-Fragile, and particularly through the lens of human systems. You know, what would it be like for us as individuals to be anti-fragile, and for us to help the people in our lives and the systems that we're part of, whether that's in our workplace, in our families, in our friendship groups, to become anti-fragile as well. What's my favorite part of the book? And I think, well, for me, there are two. As much as I love all the book, I think I talk about it's a bit like kind of, you know, having a child or growing a baby. There are lots of bits of it that I love. But there's a bit in the introduction, and it's towards the end, when it's really kind of the call to arms. And I guess this is the bit where I really hope that before you've even started the book, you feel ready to take on the journey. And so this, I'm going to read to you my favorite part. I invite you to take the path of courage as you read this book, to let go of your current ways of thinking and behaving when they do not serve you, to embrace the opportunity to lean into challenge rather than avoid it, to embrace the uncertainty and to learn to thrive through disruption and change. I invite you to achieve things through your leadering for yourself and for others that you had never imagined possible. In becoming anti-fragile, I hope that you become more of who you truly are and experience more of what you truly want. And so that's my favorite bit, because that really is what my hope is for the book. And then as we come to the end, and I also invite you to think about, this is a journey that we don't do at anyone else's expense. We don't become anti-fragile and tread on others as we make our way in our own journey. We actually lift others up. So that idea of being in service to ourselves, yes, but also to others as we go on the journey. So that top and tailing piece, that call to arms, and then that invitation to be in service as you go on your journey, I think they're probably the two bits that have most meaning for me. And everything in between is the kind of why, what, and how to go on that journey for yourselves. So I want to get into the questions that Kevin shared with me that you have. One was a very practical question around the survey. And firstly, I want to say I'm so pleased that you've chosen to dive into the survey. It's a great companion to the book. Whether you do it before or after reading, I think that's an interesting one. I certainly give an invitation as you go through. Sometimes I think that the results report has more meaning once you kind of read the book and you've really got a good understanding of the concepts and ideas. In terms of how frequently you take it, this is an interesting one. We've got so much uncertainty and disruption going on right now. I'm encouraging the people who take the survey and who I therefore have emails for, to take it almost on a quarterly basis. And that's because, you know, things are changing so rapidly and quickly right now with our situation with COVID, and just generally things seem to be very much, the speed of disruption and uncertainty seems to be pretty pacey right now. So because things are changing so quickly, I would recommend that you take it every 3 months or so. Another interesting question was, well, what do I take it thinking about work? Do I take it thinking about personal life? Or is life just life? And I think there's an interesting exercise to do here. And that is really to take the survey at the same time, but very much one with kind of your work hat on, thinking about how would I answer these questions in my work role? And then do it again, thinking about what about my outside work persona, my outside work roles, and how I show up to those. And then compare the two reports. Because ultimately, yes, what we're looking for is integration. We're looking for however you show up in one, really in the best version, the most anti-fragile, for that to feed into the other, and for us to be one integrated and anti-fragile version of ourselves across our personal and our professional lives. So there is an and answer to this. I think it would be a really interesting exercise to take it twice. Once very much with your work hat on, then again thinking about how you are outside of your work roles, and just see where those differences are, and then be curious about what serves you in those differences, and what doesn't. What might you need to let go of in order to be that more integrated version of yourself? Because believe me, showing up as different versions of ourselves is one of the most exhausting things that we do. And so this working towards integration is what helps us have anti-fragile energy that actually keeps us in the game for the long term. The next comment was around robust and how useful it is to have an acronym to remember the guiding principles. And as I mentioned in the book, acronyms are great because basically our brains are lazy. And so they're looking for shortcuts for us to store lots of information, but to be able to do that in the most effective way possible. And that's really why I kind of worked quite hard to think about, okay, what are the principles that I want to bring to life, and what's an acronym that will make sense in terms of its connection to anti-fragility. So understand that even by using that acronym, you are recruiting your brain because you're working with the way that our brains like to work. And it helps then not overload the prefrontal cortex, which is one of the things I talk about in our Recruit the Brain principle. And it means that we can access all of the information that we've got stacked behind robust. And when we think about, oh yeah, operate in reality. Now, what does that mean? Oh, it means that I don't tell myself stories. It means that I question whether the stories are true. And so just behind that O, you then got kind of this filing cabinet of understanding what that O means. So that's why the robust principles and that acronym are a really useful way for you to kind of have a storage, a filing system of what they mean, and then how you can bring them to life, what the principles are. I love that via negativa really hit home for some of you. It was certainly, as I read Taleb's original work, that was one that was kind of most directly able to be translated into the book. And interesting, fascinating research around, do we intervene in kind of medical situations, or are there times when actually just letting the body heal is the most sensible way to go? And I think that we have become so locked into and so ready to take action. And I know that I'm certainly one of those people. I love to do lists. I like to feel like I'm moving things forward and making progress. And yet actually that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've had to learn. And that is that sometimes the best thing I can do is just to sit and ponder and let things unfold in the way that's kind of natural for them to unfold. And that's the via negativa, that sometimes no action is the best action to take. Loved that you enjoying the research around what happens to our peripheral vision when we are in a positive mood versus a negative mood. I think it's really important to understand that our mindset, our psychology has physical implications for what we're experiencing, not just in terms of kind of heart rate and stress hormones, but in lots of other ways as well. And the work of Barbara Fredrickson, who I feature in the book, her most recent work looks at that in even more detail. So if that's something that you're interested in, I recommend you Google Dr. Barbara Fredrickson and what she's been looking at in terms of how our different emotional states affect so many things physiologically as well as psychologically. And then finally, Kevin's asked me to touch on mindset and stress and our mindset towards stress. And I think that this is kind of, if there's one of the biggest, chunkiest pieces that is within Becoming AntiFragile, it's this reframing of struggle and this reframing of stress that we can each do for ourselves, and that will certainly serve us as we continue to navigate the uncertainty and the disruption that without a doubt we have ahead for a while yet. That actually letting go of how we may have thought about stress in the past is what's most going to serve us going forward. Because as I write about in the book, stress is not something that we necessarily need to recoil from. It's something that we actually need in order to thrive. It's something that we need in order to grow. And if we can really shift our mindset away from it being something to be avoided, to accepting, to operating in reality, to accepting that stress and struggle are part of the normal experience of life. And that as we experience them, it doesn't mean that we're broken in some way. It doesn't mean that we're failing. And how is it that rather than moving into that kind of mindset, we can be curious, we can kind of detach from the actual diving into a pit of struggle and kind of trying to fight what's going on, and actually take a step back, take those 3 deep belly breaths, which I talk about in Recruit the Brain, so that we're staying as effective as possible, and be curious about, well, where is the stress point here? What is the thing that I am feeling unsafe about? Because if we can do that, if we can slow everything down, if we can understand and accept that this is okay, this is just part of our natural experience, then we'll be able to navigate the lumps and bumps in the road far more effectively. And as the research that I mentioned by Aaliyah Crum shows, our mindset towards stress actually predetermines how physiologically we respond. So what the neurotransmitters are that are released in our brains, and what goes on in terms of physically. One thing that I will say I have found really helpful is to notice physically, where do I feel my stress? And I know, again, this is one of the hacks that I've put into the book, because that can be one of the most useful early warning signals for you to tap into. So this mindset, this understanding that actually stress and struggle, it's okay, doesn't mean we're failing, doesn't mean we're broken. And then this curiosity around, okay, where's the learning in this? Getting into the learning loop, adopting your tinkering mindset, and asking that core anti-fragile question, how can I be better coming out of this experience than I was going into it? That's really what's going to help us play that long-term game, tackling the infinite game, and being able to thrive as the disruption and uncertainty continues. Well, that's enough from me. I want you to enjoy your 2nd birthday celebration together. Thank you so much again for inviting me to be part of it. And if you've got any other questions about the book, please email me, paige@drpaigewilliams.com, and I'd be very happy to reply. So happy 2nd birthday, and enjoy the rest of your gathering. Bye for now.